Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast, the podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. I am Scott Challinor, and once again I'll be exploring a new perspective on leadership, joined each week by a different CEO, CFO, director, president, government minister, and one day perhaps even the education secretary. That's if he's still in a job by that point, of course. The aim in these interviews is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make this country work. We discuss everything from sustainability to green mortgage eligibility, and of course the innovation and success that makes it all worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current economic and political landscape here in the UK. We will be hearing from incumbent Leaders Council Chairman and former Education Secretary Lord Blunkett a little later on in the show. But first and foremost, I'm delighted to be joined by Matthew Fleming-Duffy, Director of Specialist Independent Mortgage Broker Cherry Mortgage Finance based in Bournemouth. A large part of our discussion will be on the issue of green mortgages, products which aim to provide homeowners with better mortgage deals for trying to improve the energy efficiency of their home. Matt, a very warm welcome to you and many thanks for joining us on the programme today.
Thanks, Scott. Very glad to be talking.
Likewise, it's a real pleasure having you on the air with us, Matt. And with the future of the property market uncertain in these times, many people are, of course, keen to jump on the property ladder. And recent research has revealed the extent to which the public actually understand mortgage options and also how much value we are placing on sustainability when it comes to our homes as well. Now, I understand you're quite clued up on alternative mortgage options that are out there, particularly for those who are aiming toward being environmentally friendly. But before we discuss that in a little bit more detail, what exactly has this recent research shown about public understanding of this subject matter and the extent to which sustainability is at the forefront of the minds of the consumer?
It's a very good question. I mean, the UK mortgage market is very broad. It's very competitive. There are over 100 lenders in the UK, and there are literally thousands of mortgage products. So it's a big ask to say to any consumer, go out there in the mortgage market and get the right product, get the right solution that meets your needs. But you're right, there are large numbers of people that are actively sort of making efforts to help protect the environment, or indeed they've stated that they want to take steps to help protect the environment. Indeed, in our research, we found that over 50% of people surveyed said that they were always looking to make their homes more energy efficient. But there seems to be this large disconnect between the desire to have a sort of a positive impact on the planet and actually converting these desires into action, particularly when it comes to green finance. For example, only 16% of people who responded to our survey intend to apply for the government's Green Homes grant. So, yeah, it's this kind of marrying of the two aspects of home ownership, property purchase, the mortgage financing that comes along with it, and then the kind of the extra assessment that's required sometimes to work out what can I do to make my home more energy efficient and where is the funding for it.
And of course, this September, we'll see the introduction of that exact scheme, the government's Green Home Grant. It offers homeowners, for those tuning into this, up to $5,000 in vouchers for implementing energy efficient measures into the home. And it's currently expected that over 600,000 homes in England will be able to take advantage of that, Matt. Am I right?
Yeah, that's a government statistic that has been issued. Around 600,000 homes, I think, will be able to sort of take advantage of the scheme. But it's obviously going to only go so far. Not everyone's going to qualify for the scheme. But more importantly, and again, this is another sort of government stat, there are 17 million homes in the UK with an energy performance certificate below a band C. So that just means they are not energy efficient, quite simply. So again, the grant will go a certain way to kind of helping some people, but we still got this huge problem with old housing stock that needs to be retrofitted with energy efficient improvements. Green mortgages have been discussed in the UK for years, in the UK, more recently with, some sort of government incentives around developing green mortgage products. They've been around in the US for 25 years, this sort of type of financing, but we are yet to really see that kind of traction in the mortgage market in the UK with green finance options. It's developing. I think that this is key to for people to understand that certainly with the incentivization from the government under the Green Home Finance Innovation Fund, which of course was launched last year and awarded this year. I'm really waiting to see what Lloyds Banking Group, which is one of the successful bids for the fund. I'm waiting to see what sort of green mortgage they're going to come up with. You've got the Monmouthshire Building Society that are developing products now in a small area in terms of sort of green finance, but the market is lacking really. Like I say again, if you think there's 100 lenders, thousands of products, there's only one really kind of standout product, in my opinion, and that comes from the Saffron Building Society. Now, if you were remortgaging your home or buying a home up to 80% of the value of that property, the Saffron has a 2-year fixed rate at 1.47%. That in itself is a very, very competitive deal. But most importantly, if you improve the EPC rating for your home within 6 months by at least one band and to at least a band E, then that rate drops by 0.1%. That makes that deal 1.37%, which is pretty much the best 2-year fixed rate mortgage on the market at 80% loan to value. But you can hear the conditions that I'm sort of referring to here. If you're not looking for a 2-year fixed rate, or if you have a different loan to value, then that product is not the best product for you, or probably not the best product for you. There would be many, many other options. So it's lacking. The market is lacking with that sort of that broader brush approach, with more and more products that are starting to appear, but too slowly.
And I suppose developing a sustainable mass market solution may prove to be difficult as well without significant funding from the government as well, considering the fact that for banks and building societies, there is the risk of revenue losses there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's in my mind, it's not for the government to necessarily fund these types of products. I mean, look, the Green Homes Grant is brilliant. It's limited. It's certainly going to have a limited appeal. But look, I don't think it just needs funding from the UK government. Any funding is obviously going to be gratefully received. There's no question. But I think that what the government really could do is just start bringing in the kind of disparate regulations and industry bodies into a room to say, we need to galvanize thought now and get plans into action around how we can encourage the UK to be a leader in this type of finance. And there's a batch of ways that we can do that. I mentioned the USA's green mortgage modeling, which has been around since the mid 1990s. That's something we can pretty much copy. Where lenders can use enhanced affordability calculations based on the fact that as consumers you would have a reduced energy cost. If you make your home more energy efficient. Now, like I say, Monmouthshire are working on that product at the moment, but again, it's one lender. I think that this again, if you bring in the UK regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, into those discussions around affordability assessments, I think that could certainly help more and more lenders go down that road. Equally, look, making your home more energy efficient isn't necessarily recognised as increasing the value of that property. Now, this is something where you need to be talking to surveyors, you need to be talking to estate agents, because there's a real sort of focus on short-termism when we look at these kind of values, and we need to be looking, medium to long term. Look, if your home is inefficient in terms of energy, your bills are going to go up. What kind of measures as a country are we going to start instilling in the future around penalising properties, for example, that aren't energy efficient? These sort of questions are going to be asked more and more as time goes on, as energy bills go up. And I think that is going to have a very direct impact on property prices. So to kind of engage with like I say, surveyors and estate agents to say, look, we need to start having this discussion. The Energy Performance Certificate, this EPC, does something to say, here is your rating, but it doesn't do anything more than that. It sort of says, this is where your house, your property is right now in terms of energy efficient, and this is what it could be if you spend money. But there isn't then this kind of, this related uplift in property values for the future, which I think, like I say, I think we should really sort of form into those conversations. Thirdly, and I think most importantly, there are capital requirements that mortgage lenders have got to fulfill when they lend, when they provide us as consumers, when they provide us with mortgages, they have to have money set aside. This is a good thing. This has obviously come about following the credit crunch, which is over a decade ago, where banks weren't shoring themselves up in case of problems. So banks now, if, for example, they're lending you £1 on a low-risk mortgage, they would have to set aside 30p in that pound, in a kind of a safe haven, so that if things go wrong, they've got their own capital reserves. Now, that capital requirement increases the riskier the mortgage transaction becomes. So a higher loan to value transaction would need a larger capital requirement. Now, my suggestion, and this of course needs full engagement with the Bank of England or the Prudential Regulation Authority, which is a division of the Bank of England, to say that with green mortgages, perhaps the capital requirements could be reduced. So where, for example, with a low risk mortgage, you would need to say, a bank would need to put away 30p in the pound, they may need to only put away 25 pence in the pound for a green mortgage. Now, that I think would then lead to a widespread repricing of mortgages, but it enables banks to offer incentives, better price products for people that are trying to help the kind of the green economy, that are trying to make their homes more efficient, and of course are contributing towards the government getting closer to its net zero emissions target, which is a very ambitious target, by the way. So I think that if you start sort of folding in those three mechanisms to regulatory discussions, I think what you'll find naturally then is that you have a far broader range of green finance products, green mortgages that are open to many, if not all, people that are seeking to go for a mortgage. In other words, if I buy a property, I can either take go to whoever, Barclays, Halifax, whichever bank lender you choose, and I can either have their standard products, or if I'm going to commit to make energy, efficiency measures, to my property, then I would naturally get, some sort of better priced rates, with all products. That in itself as a model loosely follows what Barclays are doing at the moment, but it only applies to new build homes. And in my mind, new build homes are not the problem. It's the older housing stock that's the problem. And the UK has got more than its fair share of wonderful, glorious older buildings, but of course they're just not energy efficient.
And that's, of course, something which is certainly on the agenda to hopefully be resolved in future, you'd hope. You're absolutely right in saying that the UK became the first of the G7 nations to set itself that ambitious goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And indeed, as part of that wider commitment, the government announced its green finance strategy back in July of last year and committed a £5 million fund to help the finance sector develop products such as green mortgages. But as you've said already, progress on the creation of such products is very slow. There's been little take-up by British mortgage lenders. But do we think that this green mortgage fund is going to have any significant impact on mortgage lending and consumer behaviour, considering everything that's gone on since last year with the new focus on sustainability through COVID-19?
In short, no. I think any step is positive. I don't want to bash it. That's not in my personality. But it was a very, very small incentive for a very small number of providers to consider, developing products. Now, I said to you, Lloyds are one of the winners of that fund. The Monmouthshire Building Society were another, and then a new firm called Home Infrastructure Technology, I think, something like that. Where they're going to create a mechanism, not dissimilar to something like the Help to Buy scheme, where you can go to a central hub to find information, to link you up with builders and finance providers and sort of things like that. Now, that's my understanding of it. But of course, the information on how to kind of make your home more energy efficient is already there. The government's created, or the Department for BEIS, or Business Energy Industrial Strategy, has already produced a website called Simple Energy Advice. That's great. I urge people to go and have a look at that website. They're developing and encouraging people to register for, tradespeople to register for the Trustmark, which of course is where they are setting industry standards for builders, for tradespeople to be registered to offer green home improvements. But going back to this this innovation fund, but it was good to start talking around these kinds of products. But look, Saffron, for example, did not win. I don't know if they put a bid in even, but they certainly didn't win, any of the government funding. But they have produced a product, this retrofit mortgage product, that is absolutely market leading. So they did that without the sort of government incentivization for research on that product. Product. So if they can do it, in my mind, other lenders should be doing it as well. There are, some products that are out there. I mean, Nationwide and Newbury Building Societies, for example, are both offering, good deals for their existing customers when they want to borrow more money, if they want to increase their current mortgage, and the additional borrowing goes on a new deal, with those particular lenders. But again, very, very limited in terms of the sort of broader marketplace. We need this traction. We need this galvanization of different regulatory principles to say we need to encourage the market to go in a certain direction. I think there's never been a better time. For us to react to this in the UK, but certainly internationally, I think that we'll find that the public is far more supportive of a kind of a green recovery. Again, if I go back to our research, we had almost a third of people that responded say that this coronavirus pandemic has made them think more about their carbon footprint. Now, those things that you think are unrelated. What's my carbon footprint got to do with, a viral outbreak, a pandemic? So people are starting to think more holistically about where are we in the planet, in this evolutionary, kind of role that we have as human beings on planet Earth. What's my relationship with our development as a species, and what should we be doing as a whole to make sure that the future is protected for future generations? All of this, in my mind, and please, accept my apologies for kind of releasing my inner hippie with this, but this is all about sort of being that change that you want to see, and having a positive impact on our planet, and those are kind of overused, very soft phrases now, but it is, and I think people are very open to the idea of what can we do? What can we do as a society, as a country? How can the government help encourage banks and building societies to produce products to help me as a consumer start doing the right thing? It's I wouldn't say we're going through an existential crisis necessarily, but certainly it feels that way for a lot of people who have just taken stock and said, what's important? I had some very, very nice country walks with my sons at the point of the lockdown. We had more time to go for walks down the river. And just play with the kids, and things like that. People are talking about moving out of cities. I think if you look at Rightmove data, the kind of the website, property website, they had a huge number of hits at a certain point when the kind of stamp duty holiday was announced a little while ago. But interestingly, they said that there has been a huge shift in terms of what people are looking for when they're looking to buy homes. And there were far more searches from people looking to buy homes in the countryside or by the seaside, rather than looking to buy in cities and sort of moving into a city to work. To have to be close to your place of work now has become less important very, very quickly for a huge number of people. So all of this is sort of feeding into this psyche, the national psyche of what's important and what's it all about.
And I suppose with it being a new product, there is just that air of unfamiliarity as well, which may be hampering the uptake of such products. Because while 83% of people don't actually know what a green mortgage in itself is, there is room for misconceptions surrounding green mortgages, which can damage the uptake.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We had some quite funny results really from our research. We had I think 7% of people saying that they thought a green mortgage was for a home that had a green door, and even 4% said that green mortgages are only for vegans. I mean, ultimately there is no sort of formal definition of a green mortgage. We're dealing with that, I think, as a sort of start point. But ultimately, if we go back to basics and the things that, we should be talking about, and what the EU is talking about, and what the US has been talking about for 25 years, is this retrofit, this kind of taking a home that needs to be made more efficient. In terms of energy, it needs to be insulated. You need to talk about low carbon heating. It needs to be draft proof. All these kind of things. These are the measures that we need to be talking about with our older housing stock, because we've got some of the largest older housing stock in the whole of Europe. So this is where green mortgages come in, and I think this is what we should be clearer about with our definition of what a green mortgage is. I don't think it should apply to new build homes. Like I say, these aren't the problem, but hey, in the broader context of where the mortgage market is, why not? If you're encouraging builders, to build homes that are energy efficient, why not then reward, the consumer in the purchase of that property, that they should get green mortgage discounts too. So I think that the retrofit should be the key focus with this. A green mortgage, I think we need to sort of make that definition that a green mortgage really relates to making your home, or buying a home that is already energy efficient.
And for those that are looking to make a positive change by perhaps considering getting a green mortgage, what influence can such a product actually have on the environment?
It's a good question. I mean, look, these are small steps, for individual consumers. But like you say, and again, here comes this inner hippie again. This is really about sort of being the change that you want to see. There are 17 million homes in the UK that have, an EPC below a band C. In other words, they are poorly insulated and have inefficient heating and hot water systems. With green mortgages, banks and building societies can incentivise us as consumers to play our part in making our homes more energy efficient, which will, of course, reduce our energy bills, along with sort of tackling the sort of broader issue of greenhouse gas emissions in the UK. And like I say, going back to one of my earlier points, in the longer term, it may have a significant impact on property prices as energy becomes more and more expensive. So, yeah, it's certainly small steps at the moment, but it's steps in the right direction. It's positive steps.
And for listeners who may be tuning into this, who may be considering getting a green mortgage, what would you say they should be looking out for?
I guess I would say this, but it's probably worth speaking with a good broker. As many of these sort of new products that are appearing in the market are coming from smaller building societies, such as the Saffron Building Society. Always, it's really important to get the right advice when you're trying looking for a mortgage. The internet, in many ways is a blessing and as a curse, as we know. There's lots of great information out there, but lots of misinformation, or indeed you can interpret things inappropriately. So if you're looking for a green mortgage, start with Google for sure, but go off and try and find an intermediary, a broker that can help you and guide you possibly in the right direction with that.
And how is Cherry Mortgage Finance actually contributing towards sustainability in the sector to date? Because I understand as of January, you were offering your own version of a green mortgage, essentially, weren't you?
Yeah, well, we yes, we've been doing it for quite a while. I mean, look, we're a small firm, so it may be easier for us than for larger firms, but we're pretty much carbon neutral. And we work with a firm called Carbon Footprint, and for every mortgage that we arrange, we are planting a tree in the UK, and we're offsetting 1 ton of CO2. So yeah, we're doing our bit. We've been doing it for over a year now. So yeah, we're fighting the good fight.
And since part of the reason we're here as well is to discuss these issues within the context of leadership, what did it take from yourselves to sort of get that scheme off the ground?
Well, like I say, we're a small firm. I think I was just sort of getting, we were getting frustrated with the lack of green mortgage products available. We wanted to start encouraging people, to start looking for this type of finance. But of course, where the products just aren't there, we had to we felt we wanted to fill that gap to say, look, we want to do something. We want to be involved in this step change towards a greener future, towards a more sustainable future. So it was a relatively simple process for us to go through to start looking at what we could do as a firm to help the UK, move towards it, its greenhouse gas emissions targets, but equally just to, kind of be a positive force to maybe have a sort of positive influence on the market. So yeah, it was a simple step for us to make. Undoubtedly harder for larger firms. We're Diddy, by comparison to the big corporates, but it's something I think they could engage with. I don't see why. It's not an expensive mechanism. It's certainly something that I think, big corporates do engage with on a certain level. And like I say, our commitment is literally for every mortgage that we arrange, we're taking these measures. So I don't know. Maybe some of the banks copy what we're doing. That we're more than happy with that.
I suppose a slightly separate issue as well, again relating to a lack of clarity for consumers who are looking to improve their homes, is the fact that those that have good intentions to be sustainable perhaps aren't clued in, won't know what the best solutions are for their property in a practical sense. So they won't know whether solar PV panels coming in will be a good idea, ground source heat pumps, for example, biomass secondary heating. So there needs to be places where they can go to source that information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this, the government website, Simple Energy Advice, is a great place to start. You can go through a process of starting to understand, what we can do as consumers, what energy measures, we could install ourselves. We're working with a local firm. In that we're, working with they're an energy consultancy firm. They go through a process of assessing a property. You're running an EPC, looking at the measures that can be installed to make the property more energy efficient. The kind of trusted trader, the kind of trust mark that's been offered by the government. These are great places to start going through this process of working out what you could do. But you're right. I mean, you start drifting in to energy efficient measures, and you just get lost. As a consumer, there are so many different options, so many things to consider, and some things may not stand the test of time. It's a real tricky one. I mean, we've had this idea of solar roof tiles. Elon Musk's firm. Producing solar roof tiles, I'm waiting to see those appear. To see what they're going to look like in terms of costing, and how much better they are than the kind of solar cells on the roof. But there are absolutely so many options that you need to consider as a consumer, and it is very difficult getting to that that kind of right place. But like I say, the government website. Simple Energy Advice is absolutely fine for starting that process, but there's, the Energy Savings Trust, amongst others, there's other places you can go for sure.
It's a staggering statistic as well, isn't it, that 4% of those who sought out from mortgage advisors were advised about green mortgage products, according to your research. So there's further ignorance there within the market, and until that statistic improves, of course, we're not going to see the uptake in this that we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, again, the products aren't there. Broadly speaking, the products aren't there, so consumers aren't asking about them, and therefore, mortgage brokers, intermediaries, advisors generally are not then talking about green mortgages because, like I say, unless you're looking at, you go back to the saffron product, as intermediaries, we've got a duty of care. We've got a duty to provide a consumer with the best mortgage product that kind of meets their needs. And that ultimately comes down to price most of the time. So unless you're looking at an 80% loan to value remortgage and you're looking for a 2-year fixed rate where the saffron product would come up, and in the sort of realms of the conversation around that kind of product, it would be disclosed that, of course, there's an incentive to make your home more energy efficient. Outside of that, you'll be just sorely as a consumer looking to borrow money, X amount, whatever that figure is, and just getting the best deal that you can. Interestingly, we actually found within our research, I'm just going to refer back to this now. 20% of people said that they would even pay a higher interest rate. They'd be happy to pay a higher interest rate for their mortgage if they knew that this was an eco-friendly mortgage, if you like. So they're working with a firm that's being good to the environment. From a consumer perspective, people are more open to paying a premium, if you like, for green finance. But I don't think that's the way we should go from a governmental perspective. We need to be focused on getting consumers the kind of the best deals. Like I say, as an intermediary, we've got an absolute duty of care to find the best price deal for that consumer. So, I'm not surprised that the conversation isn't really being had around, green finance as an option because, broadly speaking, unless you're in that 80%, that sweet spot of 80%, then there'll be a whole batch of other mortgage products that will be far more competitive for most people.
Completely understand where you're coming from that point of view. Before we do come to a close on the programme today, Matt, given the unprecedented challenge that we have all been facing over the last few months with the COVID-19 outbreak that we've mentioned already, I feel it would be remiss of me not to ask you just how Cherry Mortgage and Finance has fared over this period, because it's been a real testing time for all of us.
Yeah, certainly at the sort of the point of lockdown, we went very, very quiet. There was this initial kind of response that we gave to our clients where we had mortgage applications already submitted, so in the pipeline, just trying to sort of manage expectations that things can't really be processed. So we went very quiet. The phone wasn't ringing very much. I wasn't getting many emails. Like I said, from a personal perspective, it was quite nice to sort of go out and have nice long country walks with my boys. Walking along the river near here, sort of things like that. I grew up in the 70s. It was very much like being in the 70s. You stepped outside, you didn't hear cars, you didn't really see aircraft flying above. It was odd, wasn't it? I think we all, felt that kind of sense that things were just very different and very odd. The moment the kind of lockdown easing started to sort of come into force, so, all the easing measures, sort of came into action. We started to see things picking up. First of all, people that had the pipeline, of their mortgage applications, being processed, started saying, "Great, I've heard lockdown's gone. When can I get my mortgage agreed? When can I get my offer?" And of course, again, we had to sort of go through this process of saying, "Well, yeah, but hold on. Of course, banks have still got, lenders have still got furloughed staff. They're working under safe working conditions, so people are working from home, so that makes things very slow. And of course, surveyors, it took a while to kind of get to the point where they were clear about how they could go and physically value a property, get a survey completed, again, under the sort of safe working conditions. And there was a huge backlog. So things started to pick up, through the kind of easing of the lockdown. And then, of course, along came this stamp duty holiday. And we've seen an explosion, in inquiries and people wanting to proceed with buying somewhere. You've got this then this kind of mix, haven't you, of people that have been in lockdown, for a couple of months and have now realised that we need a bigger garden, or we need a garden, or we need another bedroom, or some people have decided to go their separate ways in lockdown. I had an inquiry from a chap, actually. It's quite an amusing, a funny guy, actually. But of course, he's been living in lockdown with his mum and dad, and decided, so they've just got to get out. I need to go and buy my own place now. It's okay in normal times, living at home with mum and dad, but now I need to get out, I need, and buy my own place. So there's this sort of pent up desire, pent up, demand, if you like, to think about moving. And then, of course, you incentivize, that kind of that moving, that purchase of a bigger, better, or first property. So we've now become very, very busy with mortgage applications. I spoke to a solicitor just the other day who said that they thought they were around 2 or 3 times the volume of inquiries or cases that they had at this time last year. So their business volumes are up. But of course, we still have to temper that with the fact that, as they said, they've only got 60% of their staff working at the moment. So, it's a tricky market at the moment. There's a lot of activity, but of course, the kind of managing expectations at the moment is a big part of my role. But yeah, it certainly is very, very busy now.
And would you say that there is anything that this experience of having to adjust to a new reality has taught you in your capacity as director?
I think the ability to adapt has been very important. Look, we're small. We can change. We can adapt. We adapted very, very quickly. To kind of all working from home. Technology has come on leaps and bounds. We were lucky to already have a VoIP system, voice over internet protocol, where we make telephone calls via the internet. So our people that we work with are all able to sort of work from home. Of course, we've engaged with things like Zoom and Teams and had more Skype and WhatsApp calls. So I think it's just the ability to adapt. But I think the world has adapted. I think that humans have adapted very, very rapidly to this idea of change. In that, I really don't think we can go back to the way things were. In many, many ways, look, coronavirus, the scientists are still, learning about coronavirus and how much immunity we can create as humans, whether it's vaccine, it can be effective, what comes next. This is now about discussions around the future. How are we going to operate as humans? And, getting back to this idea, of us as a small firm, it was very easy for us to, like I say, just switch operations to working from home. Lots of businesses, big businesses, are finding that they can do the same thing. And like I say, when I first sort of started working, if anyone said that they were going to be working from home, it was normally on a kind of Friday or Friday afternoon, and it was followed by a nod and a wink. But people sort of saying that they're working from home, but the ability to work from home these days is so much easier. It's very practical. You don't need to get in your car. You don't need to go through that rat race. You haven't got to fight traffic or squeeze yourself on the tube or on a bus to get to your place of work. You really can do your work from home, and I think we've embraced that. The human race has embraced that so much more so quickly because we've had to. So I think that we have adapted, very quickly as a small firm, but a lot of the big firms are doing the same thing. I keep seeing articles around these bigger firms. I think there's an article on BBC today even that said that there's a large number of big corporates that still aren't putting plans in place to get everybody back into the workplace. Is it needed going forward?
It's certainly going to be interesting, isn't it, to see just how the workplace is looking and has changed by the end of the decade. Of course, this new decade has started very much with a bang, I think it's fair to say. And the office has changed, not just, of course, between, of course, now and the beginning of the year, but also over the last 10 years as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see just how much it can still change over the coming years. Absolutely. Before we do wrap things up on the programme today, Matthew, if we think slightly shorter term, what is next for you and for Cherry Mortgage and Finance over the course of the next year, particularly as we adjust to the challenges of the new normal that we're going to have to live under?
Yeah, I think at the moment the key for us is to see what happens once the stamp duty holiday passes. There are countless newspaper articles and journalists that are sort of discussing the recession as a shock. That this is a really bad place for us to be in, and of course it is if you look at history and economics in that respect. This recession was to be expected. Unemployment, sadly, we're going to see a spike in unemployment, but all of the Bank of England economists are sort of talking about this V-shaped or U-shaped recession. So on the basis that the stamp duty holiday has incentivized people to move now, when that stamp duty holiday finishes at the end of March next year, I would hope that we've seen the back end of a problem, if you like, with this recession, and that we're starting to see things move into some form of economic recovery, so that the bad news isn't all that we're seeing in the newspapers, and that there are green shoots or corporates that have adapted and are turning themselves into profitable making enterprises again. And off the back of that, you would hope that then April, May, June of next year, we don't see a massive drop-off of sort of property transactions, which, of course, is something that we would have to deal with if it comes up. So at the moment, thumbs up to Rishi. I think a lot of his schemes have been absolutely fantastic. Creative economics is absolutely wonderful. I think you hear about these sort of periods of creative destruction, where things happen. You have to manage yourself out of those sort of problems. And I think the UK government's done great things in stimulating the right parts of the economy. So on the basis that all these incentives work and have a longer term positive impact on the economy, I'm just hoping that we can go past, like I say, the kind of stamp duty holiday into the next year and maintain the kind of business levels that we've got currently. So, yeah.
And let's keep our fingers crossed that that's certainly going to be the case going forward from here. Matt, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure and also an incredibly enlightening experience having you join us on the programme today. And I actually think it would be fantastic for the listeners to perhaps welcome you back onto the show in a few months' time, when not only will the impact of this current pandemic situation be somewhat clearer, but also the Green Home Grant Scheme will be up and running and we can better assess the effect that that's going to have.
I'll be more than happy to have a chat, Scott. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks ever so much for your time today, Matt, and do take care and do stay safe with all still going on.
Good stuff. Take care. Cheers.
That was Matthew Fleming-Duffy speaking, Director of Cherry Mortgage and Finance. I hope that you all enjoyed the interview. Coming up next on the programme today, I'll be handing over to Matthew O'Neill for his exclusive interview with former Education Secretary and Leaders' Council Chairman, Lord Blunkett. Lord Blunkett enjoyed a distinguished political career despite being blind from birth, holding a number of senior positions in the cabinet of then Prime Minister Tony Blair and serving as the MP for his Sheffield, Brightside and Hillsborough constituency for 28 years. He was elevated to the House of Lords in August 2015. I hope that you all enjoy listening, just as much as Matthew relished the opportunity to speak with Lord Blunkett, and all of that is, of course, coming up next.
Lord Blunkett, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be with you.
Well, of course, nothing is being said at the moment other than COVID-19, which we must touch on. What would your message be to small businesses who are trying to keep going?
Well, I think the last ones standing will be the ones that thrive when we get back to some sort of normality. So it's have confidence and courage. Obviously take advantage as far as you can of the government help. I think that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, has gone about as far as you could have expected. Mm-hmm. In the circumstances. There are obviously small businesses that fall between the cracks. Those who don't have defined premises can't benefit from the business rate waiver, have not really been able to demonstrate that they can adhere to the PAYE for furloughing staff, and of course whether they can receive the grant, 10,000 or 25,000. All of those who can are obviously able at least to benefit from that for the time being and look to the future. But I think the second thing to say, and they don't need me to tell them this as a politician who did once do a business studies qualification, which is that it will be a different world, and being able to think about how that world will look in a year's time and be creative about it and learn from not just what's happening to you at this moment in time, but to others around you and the sector that you're working in, that will be really important.
Do you feel that the long-term effects of the COVID-19 outbreak will in some ways be positive for British industry?
Well, only in the sense that people are having to be creative, they're having to adjust and innovate. Therefore, they're thinking about more productive, if you like, greater productivity ways of delivering the same service or delivering the same products. And in that sense, I think we'll have temporarily at least very much higher unemployment than we've become used to, but we'll probably have a burst of productivity, which will help with the recovery. Whether it will help with the inequity of the way in which our economy is imbalanced, both between services and productivity and the production of goods and services, I'm not sure. What we will need to try and do is to ensure that the geographic imbalance that exists is, as far as humanly possible, is dealt with by both the entrepreneurship and innovation from the bottom up and targeted government help, which will still be needed. And we are now in the throes of the kind of borrowing that we saw back in 2008 to save the banking and economic system. We're having to do that to save the whole of our productive business and commerce, and I think that will have to be sustained for some time.
Do you feel that people will take a second look at global supply chains in the wake of this outbreak?
I think there's going to be much more creative ways of using local supply and linking up inside sectors much more effectively. And I hope that the Leaders' Council will be able to play a part in that, in the sense that people who have something in common, a synergy in terms of what they're delivering, whether it's a service or whether it's manufacturing or whatever, will be able to see that there's a good outcome from knowing the sector better, linking with people, not just geographically, locally, but those in this country who may not have been on the radar in terms of what they produced for the supply chain. And of course, ensuring, because there's quite a lot of fraud going on as we speak with people getting into cyber attacks, that they'll also take account of going into the cyber security side effectively as well. The more we are online, the more people who are working from home, the more vulnerable those businesses and their supply chain become. And that's something to think about as well.
How important is strong leadership at the moment?
Well, I actually think that it's brought to the fore leadership in a whole range of areas, from obviously government itself, and there's been ups and downs with the Prime Minister's severe illness, but all the way through the public and private sector, people have, to use the jargon, stepped up, and they've shown local, regional, national level the kind of leadership that Britain historically was very good at. Regrettably, we've not seen the same on the international scene for all kinds of reasons, but maybe we will in future. So I think out of this will come experience of people who have seen an opportunity to do good, as well as seen an opportunity to provide a good service or goods, including, for instance, shortages for the health and social care system, the food chain and the like, but also I think in terms of seeing the synergy between the private and the voluntary sector and using people's commitment to each other in a very positive way. I'm not sentimental about this. Things will revert, but actually I think there's a kind of moment of moral judgment of people feeling that they've got a role to play outside the immediate survival that they're engaged in, And if we can hang on to a little bit of that social responsibility, that will be a very positive outcome.
Absolutely. Now, what's your broad view of how the government is responding to this? Are you broadly supportive of their measures?
Well, it may surprise people to hear that I have been very supportive. Of course, there's been legitimate criticisms about the speed of response on protective equipment and on issues relating to testing. But my own view is very similar to the challenge that was made to the Prime Minister of Italy when people said, why didn't you close Italy down faster? And he said, a fortnight before we did it, I would have been considered to be a madman and nobody would have agreed to do it if I'd tried to move too quickly. And I think that's something that we need to reflect on here in the UK. We may have seen the signals elsewhere across the world and taken them more seriously at the time. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but as someone who's had his life in the opposite political party to the present government, I think that with some hiccups and mistakes, they've not done a bad job in what has been incredibly difficult circumstances.
And you're absolutely right. In a liberal democracy that we live in, it's very difficult for people to swallow orders given to them from government.
Well, the UK and the US, and to some extent the Scandinavian countries, have a very different history and therefore interest in maintaining the freedom to decide and the persuasion and consent that's required. Those countries that have experienced one way or another totalitarianism over the last century have a slightly different way of coming at this. I don't want to exaggerate it, but I think that that's why getting the balance right of getting people to go along with what you want them to do in their interests as well as the nation as a whole is a sensible, proportional balance. And I think we now need to adjust to the coming out of the crisis gradually, readjusting to recovery in the same way.
Now, something you've mentioned recently on this balance is the police overreach in the enforcement of the COVID-19 structures that have been put in place. What have they done right, and where have they gone too far?
Well, I think that they were interpreting what was not necessarily as clear advice as it might have been for all kinds of reasons, because people were feeling their way. I think what's come out of it has been a demonstration by local police services in some parts of the country that they could get people to do what was needed without the heavy hand of drones overhead or people being told that they shouldn't be walking in the street, because this was all about self-isolation, not incarceration. It was about getting people not to pass the infection on to each other and therefore to provide distance rather than to make our lives a misery. Those police services that adopted that policing by consent and chivying people along did really well. Those who went over the top, I think, soon got a very substantial pushback. And one of the strengths of our democracy is that you could have that debate. People could say, I'm terribly sorry, we think the police force in our area has gone over the top. And that in itself is a constraint and a readjustment. That's another strength of living in a country where you can have opinions and express them without actually being thought to be a fool.
Now, of course, the government has faced criticism that they were slow to react, and Boris Johnson wasn't present at the early COVID-19 COBRA meetings. Now, Number 10 has claimed that this is normal practice. The health secretary often chairs COBRA meetings related to health. Does this tally with your experience as a Secretary of State, or would you have expected the PM to be more hands-on during the initial stages?
I think different prime ministers do have a very different style. And Boris's style, which I think will now be considerably adjusted, was very swashbuckling. In some senses, delegating is a good thing, as every leader of every business or public service knows. Those who try to pull too much into themselves end up with a massive bottleneck, great failure of trust, and the inability of people to show what they're worth and to demonstrate their capability. So I'd be very wary of jumping in and saying he was wrong to delegate the essential COBRA meetings. What I was surprised about was that he didn't chair the first couple, because my experience with Tony Blair for the 8 years I was in cabinet was that Tony was a great delegator, but he would get a grip to begin with, watch what the difficulties were, and then give people direction and confidence to be able to get on with it. So looking back, I think Boris himself probably thinks, God, I wish I'd spotted the signals from elsewhere in the world more rapidly, and I'd just been there. However, this also raises another issue. All of us in positions of leadership need good teams around us. I think after this is over, he will be assessing those who really did step up and those who demonstrated their inadequacy. I think we'll probably end up in a year's time with a much stronger cabinet than we have today.
Well, absolutely. And of course, we've seen a significant drop in the visibility of certain special advisors like Dominic Cummings during this entire period. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out.
Well, it's certainly readjusted the role of those behind the scenes with those who should be taking the decisions, having received advice. Obviously, there's been a complete transformation in the profile of experts, if I might use that term, who'd previously been denigrated. Scientists, medics, people with behavioral science understanding. My only criticism was, were we getting wide enough advice? Were we narrowing it too much to a couple of key centres in London? But that's because I've always been adverse to everything being London-centric. I think there's great expertise, wisdom, experience out in the sticks, and we should use it.
Rightly so. Now, was pandemic planning part of your time as a minister, particularly perhaps when you were Home Secretary?
Well, it was, but it was on the back of risk arising out of counter-terrorism measures.
Right.
I was the Home Secretary for 3 months when the attack took place in September 2001 on the World Trade Center and beyond. We did an enormous amount of scenario planning, both desktop and real. On the back of that, it was very heavily orientated to future developing terrorism risk. I certainly got involved with talking about pandemics. I remember being at a seminar in Edinburgh where the university there had done a lot of work itself on the issue of pandemics. And of course, we saw SARS and other things emerging. I think people criticized the government for not picking up the report from 2015, 5 years ago. I think that what happens is human nature kicks in. You deal with what you're immediately faced with. You can sponsor reports, and this is true of business planning, of course, as well, and scenario planning for what business continuity will look like, recovery plans for business, what will happen if there's a cyber attack, what happens if there's an energy shutdown. These kind of things you can look at, but you're immediately turning your eyes to what's in front of you. And had we picked up a bit more on the danger from Ebola and SARS and what have you in the past, then we might have said, what if something hits us in the developed nations that we don't have a vaccine for, that we can't immediately whisk up protective materials or equipment, or for that matter, medicines that help with recovery, all of which we now see are a danger. I think this will make an enormous difference to the planning for the years ahead. I hope it will be widened so that we don't just look at what's happened, but very rarely do you see something exactly repeat itself. Some of the circumstances will be, but others won't. So that's why I've put emphasis in what I talk about on looking at the other virus, the cyber attack scenario, which could be just as dangerous in a world of just-in-time provision. One of the miracles of the modern developed world, except for the very poor, has been the distribution of food. A lot of it on computerized, technologically advanced systems. if that were to come down, we'd be in real trouble. So I think we need to think those sort of scenarios as well.
So have a full plan across both sectors, biological warfare, pandemics, and cyber warfare.
Yes, and to do so on different levels. I think, again, thinking global but acting local, we need a lot more to think about what would happen if something took shape that actually broke down those national and global chains and how we would cope. And without, obviously, we've got enough fear and anxiety to last a lifetime. Without creating even more anxiety, we can think about those things for the future in a more rational way, I think.
Now, aside from the physical threat of the virus, one of the things that people are vastly worried about is the effect on the economy, not just the national economy, but also the world economy. Now, it has been said by certain parties, and I'd like to garner your thoughts on this. Is there a danger of the effects of the lockdown being even worse than those of the virus?
Were it be prolonged, I fear that balance would tip the other way. It is about proportionality. It is about balance. It's the wisdom of Solomon, really, to get the moment right when you start to move and then to move quickly. There's no doubt whatsoever that we are stocking up, not just on the economic and employment front, which will be devastating enough, but on the health and social well-being front, enormous challenges. And they will need careful handling because there's a lot of people whose lives, for a variety of reasons, are at risk in the future on a scale that we've been dealing with over the immediate handling of the pandemic, concentrating really hard on those affected by COVID-19, those sadly who have died or been seriously incapacitated. That will roll over into the economic, the social, the mental health and cultural well-being of the nation, and that will need all of us to pull together as well.
Absolutely. Now, do you believe the government's doing enough for business?
I think that the speed of reaction once the scale of the pandemic was clear was very good. I've praised Rishi Sunak for his action. Remember, a chancellor who only just come into office was planning to deliver the budget in the middle of March and has had at least three equivalent budgets since. I think he's handled it very well. Understandably worried now about what we're doing to our economy. The level of borrowing is sustainable because of low interest rates, but it reaches a point, of course, where it tips over so that you can't then do the kind of structural investment requirements that the government were laying out before and in the March budget. And those will have their consequences as well as a planned payback over many years. I think we've learned something over the last few months. We needed to take immediate action. We don't want another round of austerity equivalent from 2010 through to 2019. I don't think the nation, on the back of what's happened and the challenges we have, could take that. And therefore, we need a different plan, economic plan, over a much longer period, just as we did from the Second World War all the way through to 2002, when the final American loans were paid off.
Now, of course, one thing that's on everyone's lips, how much longer do you believe that the lockdown can go on for?
I believe that we need to be substantially back in action as an economy in June. This obviously is led in terms of places where people would meet in large numbers, having to adjust to the fact that it will be longer for them. And sadly, that will involve business closures. It's why the Chancellor extended the furlough scheme to the end of June. But unless we get things moving in June, I think we'll run into the summer where all kinds of services and industries will have a chain reaction effect, and what happens with one will then have a major impact on another. And then you get the skittle effect, where things get knocked down that you hadn't perceived were going to be affected. So I very much, if I were in government, and I always think of things in that context, what would I do if I were in government? I would be on the side from the second week in May, on the side of the hawks, in terms of saying we've got to start moving, and we've got to do so with the collaboration and cooperation of the public, who have got the message, who did behave, who responded magnificently. Let's try and get back, perhaps, doing things differently for a time, but substantially getting back to business as usual. And unless we do that, then those areas that can't and wouldn't expect to be back in action immediately get pushed further into the middle of the year and the autumn, and then they become unsustainable.
Now, of course, one of the other major developments we've had recently are the changes in the Labour Party. So if we could just speak on the Labour Party for a while. This might sound like an obvious question, but how does Secure differ from Mr. Corbyn?
Well, I'm biased because I believe the Labour Party has come out of 4.5 years of a black hole of a nightmare, where it neither represented a credible opposition nor an electable government, and the combination was to let those who supported the Labour Party and needed some of its policies let them down very badly. Sir Keir Starmer both is a highly intelligent, professional lawyer who, as Director of Public Prosecutions, led the service well, had to take difficult decisions at a time of austerity, understands the world beyond Labour members, but has been able to do business with those who originally supported Jeremy Corbyn and was able to command support from them. His creation of a balanced shadow ministerial team has been very encouraging. I supported Lisa Nandy, who he's made Shadow Foreign Secretary, because I thought she understood the north of England and the disaffected former Labour voters. But I believe that Sir Keir has taken on board those who have something really sensible to offer, and I believe he will be both a great leader of the opposition. More importantly, he will then present himself as a credible alternative Prime Minister. And all governments need an alternative government at their shoulder. It was true of us from 97, and it took the Conservatives some time to recover and to get to that position, but they did, and the Labour Party will, and that's crucial for our democracy. All of us need to understand and appreciate that a living, breathing, functioning democracy requires a credible, confident, and in many ways supportable opposition, as well as a government that we clearly want to do well, because none of us want, as we didn't with the COVID crisis, none of us want the government to fail. We want to see our economy recover. We want our social well-being to be taken into account. We want to overcome deep-seated inequality and poverty, and we want to do it with enterprise and entrepreneurship and business playing their role. And that is about leadership nationally, locally, in the private and the public sector, people with ideas, with confidence, with the ability to pull teams around them, above all, to have some idea of what it is they want to achieve and a very good idea as to how to achieve it.
Now, of course, one of the biggest problems Secure is facing will be tackling the party's anti-Semitism problem. There has been a recent internal report that has been quite damning. What's your response to that report, and what does Secure need to do in response?
Well, there are two reports. One which is being produced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which he will, and has already indicated, will implement in full. The second was a leaked report put together by the supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, 800 pages of private interchanges on social media, which he has, Keir Starmer, set up an investigation to identify who did it, who leaked it, what the content was, does it have any salience and lessons for us, and where necessary, action will be taken. So I hope that as he moved very quickly to reassure the Jewish community, so he will be able to take the necessary steps to back up that reassurance with the kind of actions that says that this was a blight on a historic, great political party that all of us were ashamed of. We've been able to put that behind us and to move on to facing the future with confidence.
What's the one key thing that Sir Keir needs to do to restore Labour as an election-winning party?
I think Sir Keir Starmer's major challenge is to convince sceptical voters that Labour has not only reverted to a party that they can support because they can see it acting, developing, presenting as a credible alternative government, but also that the lessons have been learned from the fiasco from 2015 onwards. In other words, there have to be very clear signals of substantial change, not just the right words, not just reassurance that we're not going back to some of the crazier policies, but actually that we've understood why the electorate rejected those policies so substantially in December 2019. If people get that message, they'll understand that the Labour Party has changed, as it did in the 1980s and early 90s, to become the electable government with the greatest majority in historic majority, even greater than 1945, which I was privileged to be able to take advantage of in 1997 when I joined the cabinet.
Now, I know what your answer is going to be to this question, but indulge me. Do you think Sir Keir has what it takes to be PM?
Yes, I do. I think he has the background, he has the experience, he has the professionalism, he has the forensic mindset, and he has the confidence to have put a team around him which will ensure that it will work. And those elements are true of all leaders. Ideas, the ability to build a team, to have confidence in that team, and to be able to demonstrate leadership in practice, sometimes at the most difficult times. And, you know, the Leaders' Council, those sharing their thoughts with the kind of thing that we're doing now with a podcast, but also joining us in linking up in that network of people who can support and help each other and learn from each other. That is what needs to be done in politics as it needs to be done in business. Thank you very much indeed, Matthew.
Well, thank you for coming on the program. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you very much, and good luck to all those listening in what has been a nightmare scenario. Good luck for the future. Have courage, have confidence, and yes, listen to those who know more about business than I ever will.
Thank you, Lord Blunkett.
Thank you.
As always, it has been a pleasure listening to and learning from our guests. I have been your host, Scott Challinor, and I hope that you all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'll be occupying my usual corner in the Westminster Arms and raising a socially distanced glass to leadership and raising standards. Please look after yourselves and consider others in your daily activities, because it does make a real difference in saving lives at this unprecedented time. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify. The views expressed by each guest in the podcast are their own. They do not represent the opinions of the Parliamentary Review, Westminster Publications, Lord Pickles, Lord Blunkett, David Curry, or any other guest on the podcast. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.